Welcome to the SAP Quote Entry Process demonstration. In this session we'll be targeting standard SAP and we will not covering SAP Lite functionality. To begin the standard entry process for quotes, we enter our transaction at the top, VA21. We need to select the quote type, and the most common type, if we use our drop down, will be the first one in our selection, which is a standard quote, QT. There are alternate options also available that we can make from time to time. Let's choose QT. And we hit enter and move into our standard quote overview screen. The first step here is to locate our sole to party or our customer. We use our drop down selection and we search using the customer's name. The pop-up here shows us two entries that are possible. The customer has an alternate ship to address, which is the bottom one here, that has 6 digits and it begins with a 6. In this selection screen we want to select the sole to party or the customer number, and that is normally a 5-digit number. So we double click and select the top entry. We hit enter to validate the customer sole to party. And our next pop-up now is the partner selection. Here we have multiple contact people set up for this customer, and we need to make a selection as to which contact person we are referring to. The contact field is very important because it is a tool that we use not only during the quote process, we use it in quote follow-up, plus it's also used in various other functions from time to time. So it's really important to capture accurate contact details so we can chase up the customer if we need to refer back to this transaction. For the purposes of this demonstration, let's assume the contact person is new to this business and we're going to create a new contact. So if we close this window, we get another pop-up which shows us any open documents for this customer, and if we need to refer to that we can do in this screen, or we can just escape out of that, escape out of the contact field again, and we'll use this button here to create a new contact person. So if we click on the customer contact button and click enter there, we now move to the customer contact tab to add a new contact person. If we page down to a blank space available, we can continue to key a new person in. The first field there is the customer's surname, followed by their first name. And we then specify whether they are a sales contact or a non-sales contact. For the purposes of what we're doing, we'll make it a sales contact. We then move over to the function. So this is what the customer does within their business. We use the drop down to make a selection from the standard list that we have available. Let's assume that this person is a purchasing manager. We make that selection and hit enter to validate. Now, in order to capture the customer's specific information in terms of their personal phone numbers and personal email addresses, we double click to make that entry. Towards the bottom of the screen, we'll just scroll down a little bit. We capture the customer specific information. So this is their personal direct phone number, if they do have one. Go down to their mobile number. If they have a valid fax, or we can move straight to an email. Now that we've captured his personal information, we hit enter to validate. and we can see that's pulled through the information into that front screen. We now save that data as the customer master data change, and we should be able to make the selection for the new contact person valid to this transaction. And we can see there Andrew Jackson was the person we created. And you can see his details come through. Andrew Jackson is the purchasing manager, and his contact number is there. The next thing we want to probably establish before we gather the customer's shopping basket is to determine the type of quote that we're doing. And that exists here in this order reason field. If we drop down, we can see two options, supply quotation or a tender/budget quotation. By asking the customer some very simple questions, we should be able to determine whether the customer has a supply quotation or whether they're doing a tender/budget. Now, the definition of a supply quote is where our customer has already been awarded a job or a project and they're looking to place an order in the not too distant future. The definition of a tender quote is basically where our customer is bidding for work where they haven't been successful yet, and they're generally bidding against other people all tendering for the same work. A budget, which has been grouped with a tender, is basically feasibility work where our customers might be looking for just estimates to determine whether a job will or will not go ahead. The most important quotes for us primarily are supply quotes, due to the fact that they will be turning into orders within the next few days or weeks at the worst case scenario. So for the purposes of this demonstration, let's assume we're doing a supply quotation. We can now move in to the detailed search screens to find the materials that the customer is looking for. We can hit the detailed search button here, or F8 takes us to the same screen. Now to search for the materials, we can see there we've got one code to select from, the 6 meter lengths. Off to the right here, it tells us that we have 8 lengths in stock. It gives us alternate unit of measure, so that is equivalent to 386 kilos. If we have any quote with reservations, we'll be able to see that there. And if we continue to scroll across, you can see unrestricted stock, we've got 11. There's 163 due in. 2 are currently committed. So let's just enter the customer's quantity. Let's assume that he wants 2 of those. If we hit the enter button again, it'll take us back to the material description screen, ready to take our next item. We can see there that we have the various lengths available for this section of 310 UB40 from 9 meters all the way up to 18 meters. We can arrow down to the length required and enter the quantity. If there's no other items for the customer's shopping basket, then we'll continue back to the front screen. It's really important to try and capture the complete shopping basket before we move off to the main screen, read back, and then potentially negotiate with the customer if required. So let's assume that we've finished capturing his requirements and we move off into the front screen by hitting the copy button there, or alternatively we can hit F5. At this point in time, you can see the 2 materials have been brought back into the front screen. We can see the pricing structure that's been set up for this customer is a ton rate there. We can also see what the equivalent discounts are, what margin we're making. So we can see 2 different gross margins there. There's a gross margin, and a net margin. The gross margin is the margin based on the product, and the net margin takes into consideration any additional rebates that the customer might get. And that may include things like settlement discount for payment on time, or they may have some sort of volume rebate agreement whereby we will be paying the customer a sum of money if they reach the required targets that we might have agreed on. So that's the reason we have two different numbers there. So generally we would at this point in time read back each of the line items to the customer, making sure that we've selected the right items. We'll confirm the price and hopefully at the end of it turn it into an order. If that is the case, we can use the function here to radio button that and convert this quote straight into an order. Let's assume that we continue off and submit this quote to the customer for their consideration. One of the things that we want to capture at this time before we finalize the quote is a job reference. When we are following up the quote, it's really important to be able to ring the customer with some accurate information so they really understand which quote we're actually following up. So we might have a customer reference being a shopping mall awning number 1, which will make a lot of sense to him when we do follow up and talk to him about that particular job or project. One of the other things we want to do before we finalize a transaction is to confirm a follow-up date. So this functionality flows to the quote follow-up process, and we should be talking to our customer and determining the date that we'll be ringing them to follow up on how they went with this project. For the purposes of this demonstration, we can change that to the 20th. And at this point in time, the quote is ready to finalize and submit to the customer. Now, in order to send it to the customer, either by fax or we may want to print it if he's in person, but let's assume for this purpose we want to email it to him. And you can see print and fax are the two defaults, but we can actually create an additional communication being via email. So we select the quotation option there, and in the medium we select external send. So that basically refers to an email. Within the function screen here, we want to be able to select the contact person information. So what this will do, it'll bring in the customer specific data rather than a generic business data. So if the customer has their own email, it'll pull it through. If it has their own contact details, it'll pull it through, as opposed to going to a generic email address that's set up for that business. So we can see there we've got our quotation. We're going to externally send it via email, and it's going to go to the customer specific data. We go to the further data tab here, and we basically tell the system that we want to send the job immediately when we save our quotation. We can check, if we click back on our communication method, this will confirm that it's going via email, and at this point in time we can do that and put print immediately, and we can release it after output if we choose to. If we back out from there, at this point we're ready to save our quote, and it will automatically email that quote to our customer. We move up to our save button. We've validated all the information. We're comfortable that everything is correct, and at this point in time we click save to finalize the transaction. We do get some information occasionally. On this particular occasion, it's telling us that the customer has open items in terms of their credit. For the purposes of the quote, it is information only. And at the bottom of the screen on the left hand side there, we can see the quotation has been saved and it generates an SAP quote number. Within the next few minutes, the customer will receive that quote via email with all the exact details that we've just entered in. That's all we have today for the quote entry process for standard SAP items. Hopefully that was of benefit, and I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you.